Yeah, thank you for joining me. It's so nice. Like the crowd, the energy is amazing. It's nice. You made my nervousness go away, so that's a good thing. So I'm here for a lot of different reasons. Some of the top things on my list are, I think that some of the stuff that I'm going to say today, I need to hear out loud. And then also, I see some of my students here. For those of you that know me, Neha just said, like, yeah, I'm an artist and educator here, and something that I always ask my students is to share their story. So this is my turn. So thank you for all doing that with me for so long. Okay, so I feel like it's important to share your story. I feel like that I have had in my educational career, I've had 3 teachers of color. I've been teaching in San Diego for 10 years now, and I've almost always been the one instructor of color in my department. So I really grew up without any kind of examples or anything like that. For the sake of being here at a library, I have my friends here helping me show some books that are from my shelves at home. The first book here, so this book was the first book I ever got on the Philippines. If you can't see it in the back, it's because it's super thin. There's not that much information in it, right? And then when I went to college, my instructor told me, like, I need you, like, he was trying to tell me, like, I think you should be a teacher. And I was like, no, that's kind of a crazy idea. And he said, let's make a deal. Like, you bring me one book of a Filipino artist, and I'll, like, leave you alone. I couldn't find one. I have one now. I couldn't afford one as a student, but it's a book on Emmanuel Ocampo, and he's a Filipino painter. When I saw his work online, I thought, okay, maybe I have a chance. Maybe I can, share my story and be that example that he was for me. Then last year, I read Dear America, and when I was reading it, I saw some words in Tagalog, which is my parents' native language, and I started to cry. And I didn't really know why. I had to think about it, and I was like, is this what representation feels like? Like when you see something in a book and you're like, oh my gosh, I could relate to that. And then it occurred to me, I really didn't have that feeling a lot, like when I was growing up. And then this last book, it's called the Filipino American Artist Directory, and it just came in the mail. It's a publication for like 3 years that has 92 Filipino American artists in it. And I can't help but think that when I was going to school and I had this one book, if I had this book, if my life would have been a little bit different. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. Thank you. Thank you. So something that was really hard for me was about like 5 years ago. This is my clicker. I had a really hard time going out to shoot. So I'm a photographer, formerly trained photographer. And when I was going out, I didn't feel like shooting anything. And I'm like a teacher, and so that's like the biggest thing that my students talk to me about. They're like, oh, I don't know what to shoot. I don't know what to shoot. What should I do? And I'm like, okay, like I have to deal with this at school all the time. What kind of advice can I give to myself? So I couldn't decide what to shoot. So I started looking at the pictures that I already had. And so these are some photo albums that are at my grandma's house. Ooh. Where should I point this? Oh, there we go. Okay, and then to my surprise, as I was going through all the books, I found pictures of my dad, and he had a camera. And I was like, are we similar? Because I grew up thinking me and my dad are just like from parallel universes. And so, yeah, I saw him with this camera, and what I realized when I was looking at a lot of the images, was that my dad photographed a lot of things that he was doing so that he could send the images home to his mom. So here he is in his barrack, or in the ship. He traveled all around the world, and that's like something that I feel like that I did too, because I constantly felt like lost and I was looking for where to go. And through the Navy, what was really nice is that he got to travel. And my grandma just had books and books and books of my dad in photographs, which is so funny because my dad hates pictures. Like, I never even knew that my dad took a lot of photos. And then slowly, my history started to reveal itself to me. So like all these years that I didn't have this like representation in the media, like I didn't see myself on TV, I didn't read about myself in books. And then I thought, wow, like everything that I need to know has already been at my house. I just never looked at it in that way. I saw pictures of my grandmother, and it made me start to think that my family had a life before me. I know it sounds like so bad, like vain, like, oh yeah, life started when I happened in my family. But that also just shows that I didn't really know that much of my past. I really didn't know. Like, it kind of like started at my grandma or my great-grandma, which isn't that far behind, you know, like not that long ago. I saw pictures of my dad. And he was a kid. And that was a really weird, strange sensation for me. I saw pictures of him with his family, and I was like, oh gosh, he must have had like some similar experiences than me. I don't know, it just like humanized my parents. You know, and I feel like a lot of things that people remember, especially from teen years, is like, oh, you fight with your parents because you don't get along, you know? And so I saw where my dad lived, and I was like, wow, my dad had a house like before we lived together, you know, all these things. And I never saw things like, I never actually saw like my parents' wedding photos and stuff like that. So I really, like, this collection was really revealing. So growing up, my dad, I started thinking, like, why do my parents have so many photos? And my dad was actually, he was in the military, so I'm a military kid, and my dad was gone for about 6 months of the year. So this was like my childhood. It was like normal, like to go to this place and drop off my dad at these like big ships. And now I'm realizing as an adult, I'm like, that's not normal. But that was my life, you know? And what we did to kind of curb that distance is we used to always send these cassette tapes to each other. And so this is a cassette tape. My dad had like a little Walkman that he would listen to, and I just kind of imagine sometimes him like out at sea on the ship, and he has this little Walkman of our voices talking to him. But the tape is labeled Long Distance, and November 15, that's my birthday. 1994, I was like in 5th grade. So I have like dozens of these, and I don't know what, I still have yet to talk to my parents about like why did they do this, but it makes me feel a lot better that I'm not the only one obsessed with preserving lots of things. And so I got it from my parents.
May, talk to daddy first. Nasa daddy, kausapin mo na si May, kukunin ko lang sa bag. Daddy?
That's me.
Daddy? Hello? Daddy? Hello? Daddy? Hello? Lisa? Hi, talk to daddy. Hi. How are you? Okay. I told you I'd call back today. Okay. I thought that when you were saying Papa, you were crying. I thought you were always crying. What? I'm crying. I know.
So it's a little bit muffled, but basically my dad's like, the last time I heard from you, you were crying. And then that also made me think like, wow, a lot of the things that I felt when I was younger, it made me feel validated. I was like, yeah, I really did miss my dad. And my reaction when he was like, well, why are you crying? And I said, 'cause. So yeah, I've been listening to these tapes, and then I started thinking like, what was it like for my dad to be listening to these tapes when he was so far away? Then I found all these pictures of when he was actually home with us. And oftentimes he was behind the camera. He was recording with the newest technology. My dad was a technology geek. And so every time there was a new type of thing to record us, he tried to get it. I have dozens and dozens and dozens of VHS tapes, Betamax tapes, 8mm tapes of all of us just randomly talking to my dad. Out of all the photos that I've found, thousands and thousands, this is the one that has just like seared in my brain. It's not photoshopped or anything. It's a real photo of me. And it made me start to think like, oh wow, this is kind of what I felt like when I was growing up. I felt really different, and I never really knew why. Like I said, like we didn't talk about it at home, that's for sure. I'm like 35, and my parents still haven't talked to me about like being Filipino. And they don't talk about it in school, so what do you do with that? Like, who are the people, if there's no people, like, if there's so few teachers of color in the classroom, who's like helping these students? Oops. I'm taking you back into history. This is like my work from my very first darkroom class. So over 10 years ago. And the assignment was something important to you. And the nicest thing about getting older is that you could look back on like who you were when you were growing up. And so right when I got the camera, I noticed that I had something to say. The thing that was really different from just like making art and going to school for art though, is critique. So I made all these images and try to be, I think I'm a pretty honest person, so I'm like, okay, these are the things that I'm thinking about right now. But I didn't want to talk about it. And I literally, I remember in my class, I would go up to the teacher and be like, I don't want to talk today, I'm just letting you know. But I have some work that I'll show. And as I learned more and more processes, I realized through the evolution of my work that I've always been trying to work on something. Like I feel like I look at the work now and I'm like, oh, I've always had something to say, but I never really knew what I wanted to say. I went to school at Humboldt State University, and there are really not that many people of color there. When I started school there, the ethnic studies program had just opened. Women's studies was very new. And what happened was when I showed these images in class, I became every race. Everybody started talking to me about ethnicity, and I couldn't take the weight of it. I felt like I was all alone and that I couldn't answer like everybody's questions. So I never talked about race in my work for a really long time after that. I got really scared. But this persona of me, like not wanting to tell or having something to say but not knowing what to say, is a repetitive thing in my work. When I went to school, for grad school, it continued. Like I keep looking at these photos and I'm like, wow, nobody really, like I'm looking at them and I'm like, I'm really lost. I like clearly don't know where I belong. I had a lot of work where it felt like I was like multiple people, this like fracture of a person, and I was thinking a lot, like to the point where I just had so many images and memories in my head that they're like kind of consuming me. So I started thinking about what kinds of things have I saved over time. This is the first note that I ever got of someone asking me to be their girlfriend. So it was like 7th grade, and I was like, why do I have this still? But I took a picture of it because I was like, okay, part of what I'm trying to do, like everybody probably knows Marie Kondo now, it's like I was trying to get stuff out of the house, and so I was like, I'll take a picture of it and then I could throw it away. But I didn't throw it away. But then I realized that the reason why I was holding on to it is because I think I needed to learn something from it. And so what I started doing with these letters that I had was I started recontextualizing them. And I started sewing them shut because I didn't want to keep reading them over and over again. So this was the letter when I first broke up with someone. And so, yeah, there's all these messages are like, I don't really want to like reopen these stories, but I don't want to forget them. And I want to know that I learned something from them. And so another thing that I had the community do, and so this is, I think, because I didn't want to feel alone, I started asking people, like, can I have some pictures of yours of people like you don't really like talk to anymore? When I was growing up, wallets were a really big, popular thing, right? And so I had all these wallet photos. A lot of them were prom, like dance images, which is really funny. And I just started sewing them shut. And like together with the community, we started kind of putting some memories away together. So not forgetting them, just putting them away. And then I started seeing how it influenced my work. I got the chance to have a show on an airplane, and I made these life vests, and I started asking people, like, what do you say to the people that you care about when you say goodbye? And then I embroidered all of the life vests with the messages that they said. Like, don't leave. Different languages, too. Ingat ka is in Tagalog, like, to take care. And so, yeah, I was very interested in, like, the community. I think this is where I started seeing my work with the community come up. I had a chance to have a show at the Athenaeum, and I interviewed 15 women from San Diego and Tijuana, and I put them in this card catalog. Because for me, like, a card catalog was super foreign, you know? I was like, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything in there about me. How do I reclaim the space? So I made I didn't make the card catalog, but I got my own card catalog, and I put my own stories in them. So, and each cabinet is labeled for each person that I interviewed. Technical.
The smell of tortillas my mother used to cook tortillas when I was a little girl. So she holds the roller with her right hand, and with the left she like stretches the dough over flour, over powder, and then she put it on a pan called comal. And then it smells so delicious, and she always gave me this first tortilla, and I put butter on it. And our kitchen was very humble. Like, it was just a wooden table, and with very Mexican mosaic tile, and then the floor was just like a plain cement floor, no tile or anything, just cement. Now that I have my son, I think it's better for him to grow in the U.S., but I also have these like binational life. I want him to continue coming here and knowing that I come from here, and I probably will keep my house here. But I'm a little scared, so I think I need to move to the U.S.
So what I learned from this project is that basically I'm not alone. I had a lot of friends that felt the same way, but they didn't know until I shared my story. And so that's why I feel like ultimately that's a really important thing to be doing. Another experiment that I had, let's see if this plays, is I looked on Instagram, I typed in the hashtag of my grandma's town. So my dad is from a small barrio in the Philippines called Sinigualasan. So I hashtagged on Instagram Sinigualasan, no pictures. So that, in a more contemporary way, made me realize, like, if I don't contribute, no one will know of this place. And that's crazy because that's where I came from, and I think people should know that. So if you hashtag Sinigualasan now, over 100 photos are there, and almost all of them are mine. And so, yeah, this idea of archiving started to become more important to me, right? I started to visualize, like, wow, this small place, like, across the world, like, if I don't document it and tell people about it, one day it will just change, you know? And just like a lot of places, it's being gentrified. It changes every year when I go back. So one day, I don't know, it might not be there, except for now I have the memories documented. My grandma lives right here. Yeah, so on the Instagram, you could see now there's 111 posts. I think there are like 4 or 5 from someone else, and it turns out it's my cousin's cousin. So yeah, it's also really cool because people are like, oh wow, you know where that is? And we have like a shared thing now. It's really cool. So when I came back from the Philippines, I was super obsessed. I looked at all these pictures from my phone, and I just started like recreating things in my studio. A lot of them were just like the foods that my grandma cooked, things that I just missed, you know. And Then it started to really occur to me, like, wow, I really am getting obsessed. My dad called me obsessed a lot of times. Like, every time I go to the Philippines, he's like, what do you... Grandma's calling.
Apparently got a phone call, my bad.
No, it's cool. Yeah, so I basically just started to see, like, through my process, I feel like my art is all about process. And I was like, wow, I'm really missing someone and some place, like, really to the point where I can't think of anything else. And I didn't really start getting to know, like, my cultural identity, I think, till I was like 30, which is crazy. You know, how did I get that far without thinking about that at all? And so what I did was I went to the Philippines. So I packed my bags. I was pretty situated. Like, I had a pretty good job, and even my dad said, like, you proved me wrong. All these years you wanted to be an art teacher, and I just was like, it's not gonna happen. And then you finally got a job, and you make almost the same amount of money as me. And he's like, I think you've made it, you know? But I quit that job because I wanted to go to the Philippines, and I couldn't get time off. And I just felt like there was something important there that I couldn't really describe, but I knew that I had to do it. So this is the day that I went with my grandma. She said that she didn't want to come back to the States. She talks candidly about, like, death, and she had mentioned to me, like, you know, I think I'll be good at, like, 90. She's 89. So in efforts to, like, preserve her and her memory, I gave her my old iPhone, and I put a lot of photos on it. I put all of her children's phone numbers, all of her grandkids' phone numbers, all of her sisters' phone numbers, so that she could call us whenever she wanted. And then this became my life. I started screenshotting her all the time, and I realized that these are, like, my new family photos. And I also started paying attention to technology. So for those of you that know, if you FaceTime, like, on Facebook, you could actually take pictures now of the person that you're talking to. And I think that technology is realizing that too now, right? That a lot of people live far apart. And how do we console ourselves when we have to deal with that distance? I documented her using the phone. I started thinking about our own family photos. And when was the last time that we had that chance? So we actually are not really ever together that much, and I think, well, yeah, that's what really kind of made all these screenshots more meaningful. So this is the last shot of all my aunts and uncles and my dad's talking to my grandpa before he passed away. They didn't get to see him before he passed. They were all on the airplane when he passed away, but I was able to Skype in the hospital. So that was a nice thing that I was able to give them. This is Christmas at my house, New Year's at my house. The first time my grandma saw my nephew. And all of a sudden, the screenshots started to become something more than screenshots. And I feel like you feel me on this because I know that you probably have a phone and that you see these notifications every day. But now when I read them, I'm like, this is my relationship. Like, this is my family dynamic that I see, that I'm working with all the time. And it made a new landscape for me. I was like, wow, I don't want to miss out on not having family photos just because my family doesn't live together. So I kind of changed the way that looks for me. And so when I see these images, now they really describe, like, the relationship that I have with my grandma. Like, how much do I miss my grandma? How much do I want her around me? And how much do I need this phone to be, like, working with good service so that I can talk to her? And yeah, like, even these, like, Facebook likes, I was like, it feels good. I know that it's like trying to not get in this like culture, but I was like, Grandma likes my photos. So yeah, it started making me think of my photos in a different way. This is Christmas last year, and it was the first time in 18 years that my whole family was in a photo together. So a lot of years have passed that I haven't been able to, like, fill that gap. Then I started thinking of the family photos that my mom would have and how often they got to take pictures. My mom, I've probably seen photos of her as a kid like 4 times. She doesn't have that many photos. And then it made me start to think, because of this photo, like, why did she make me take these photos? I remember going to the photo place, and I was like, Mom, no, I don't want to do this. I don't like this. But it made more sense, where I was like, wow, if she was coming from this, she wanted me to have a certain type of experience. And she gave that to me. So I could look at that now and be grateful for it. In this photo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 great-grandkids, right? So these are pictures, even though they look very like candid, they're very deep and personal to me. So when I went to the Philippines, I realized how much I didn't know about my grandma, and I started to record everybody. So I'm working on a film. I documented and interviewed almost like everybody in the town. This person has known my grandma for 89 years. So I thought all the people that have been with my grandma this whole time, they know her better than me, so I should ask them who she is. I interviewed all the kids. I documented the house that she lived in. I stayed in the room that my dad slept in as a kid. I put my clothes in the same closet that my dad put his clothes in. It says keep off. So my dad has been a hard ass his whole life. I documented the land where my dad was born. My grandma stood at the very edge of that curb and was like, we're American now. This is in Guam. I documented the land of the first house they bought in the US. The house isn't there anymore. I took my grandma around Guam, and she worked kind of like as a maid, or like she like helped in people's homes, and she has an amazing memory. She took me to every single house that she worked at. She told me the name of the children, the name of the parents, the food that she used to cook. She knew the addresses, she knew the street name, she knew exactly where to take me. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, my history is like in her. And then I thought, oh my gosh, she's 89. I have like a lot of things that are happening right now that I need to take care of. My grandpa passed away, and I documented everything that he owned, his pants, his brushes, everything. And then my grandma even took me to like the place where she plans on resting when she passes away. Hers is on the right. And then I started seeing something. Once I got past the experience of just like being in the Philippines for the first time, I started seeing in the Philippines, I saw TJ. And it was interesting because I've been going since I was like 16, and I have had all these photographs from TJ, right? And so what I started to realize is the more that I looked at them, the more that I realized that I didn't know which place was where anymore. And then I thought, wow, is that why I've been going there for so long? And why I feel so connected to this space. So this is an image in TJ from like when I was like 16 or 17. And then this is a photograph from the Philippines. And what I started doing was I started putting the images together to like make a new landscape. Because I was like, I can't be there, but how do I like get to some place, like that third space where I feel like at home. And the first couple images, you really see the line. But the more that I work on the series, the line starts to disappear, which is nice. It feels good to not have to pick like a side or a place, and to just feel like I could be all of that. And then I went back to the photos. I started seeing, like, this is my grandma's passport photo. Old family photos, and I wanted to memorialize them. This is my great-great-grandmother. And so I have a show right now at the New Americans Museum where all of these images are part of the show, and they're all exhibited in these like three-dimensional forms of boats, and I have a little video.
I think that the photos show, despite our generational differences, that me and my family have something in common, that we all share this feeling that's really hard to explain. It's about wanting to be in two places at the same time, the things that we gave up, the need to give your family the best life that they can have, living up to the expectation of our parents, fulfilling the legacy of our grandparents, our ancestors. There's a lot of feelings that we have to deal with that we don't really understand.
Okay, so I just want to wrap it up by talking about my work with the community. And so when I started seeing wow, this is really working for me. I'm making art and I'm learning about who I am, and I'm slowly healing from these kind of traumatic experiences growing up. And so I started Bridge, and Bridge for me is about bridging the gap between education and community. I found that as a teacher for the last 10 years that my students were still actually talking to me about similar issues that I was going through when I was growing up, and I was like, that means that something's not being addressed. And that's very, very clear to me in the classroom. And so it just started with me going to the desert, and I would take my students to do these tintypes. But really quickly, I learned that it had really nothing to do with photography, because a lot of the people that came, they made maybe a photo or two, but they just came to hang out. And I realized that I was making the community that I had been looking for a really long time. I did the People and Places project as an artist in resident at the New Children's Museum, and I think this is where my ideas really started to come into fruition. And so I made this workshop where I asked participants to draw pictures of themselves, and we gave them all the materials, and my first participant, Sophia, said this to me, and I just thought, wow. She was I think she was 4 years old, and I thought, I don't know if I ever thought like that when I was little. And then I started thinking, what can I do to help the community talk about these things that I never really got to talk about as a kid? So these are the toys that she made, and her parents were so happy to hear her talk about the people. So that's her grandpa, and her grandma, and she was saying oh, my grandpa's from Mexico, and my dad's from Mexico, but a different part of Mexico, but I live here in San Diego. And my mind was oh, she's you're so brilliant. So yeah, all the kids made their toys, and during this whole time, I get to talk to them about who they are and where they came from, and it feels good to be able to, I guess, pay that back to the community, right? So the one thing that I could get from all the hardship is to try and turn that around and do some healing, yeah. Each toy has a little recorder, and they get to record a 20-second message of who they are. Yeah, so there's a website, if you want to check it out. I hope that the stories will go live. That's something that I'm working on. A lot of you know me from the Aja Project, and with one of my classes, I had them take the camera home and say photograph things that are important to you, and this is what came back, right? So I had her look on the internet. She used Google search, and I said, what do you want to do when you grow up? Can you type that in and tell me what you see? And this is what she said. And so, again, there's things not being addressed, because if she's feeling that, and I'm 35, too much time has passed for people not to be talking about this stuff in the classroom. So I photographed her on a green screen, and I put her in the image that she picked, and we did it over and over again for all the students that were not seeing the pictures that they hoped to see when they looked themselves up. At the Media Arts Center, along with the Aja Project, I worked on a project called the Little Saigon Stories. And so I worked with the Vietnamese community in City Heights, and I taught them how to use cameras. I taught them how to record oral histories. We talked a lot about interviewing and what that is like, and how weird it could be to be talking to people about such personal stuff. But again, it's that process, I totally related to them. And here's some of the images that came from that project. And so I really feel what's nice about the talk here is that usually when I talk, I'm talking about one secular part of myself. Oh yeah, I'm Rizzhel, I'm an artist. This is what I do. Rizzhel, I'm a teacher. This is what I do. But the nice thing about this is I'm talking about a topic and how all my identities kind of intersect. And so I don't really see myself as only doing this as an artist. Because I found out that this helps, I feel I have to teach people it. Right? What do you do when you learn something awesome and makes you feel better? You want to try and give that to as many people as you can. So I'm going to end with Real Voices, and this is my stellar program in the summer that I just love. And I teach documentary film to high school students. And so here, this is La Brujeria, and it's a film about the Mexican culture stigma on mental illness. Androgen, which is about like non-gender conforming clothing. American-born Desi, which is about first-generation Indian Americans. And then on the other side, where my students are talking about being trans-border. And so I feel like these are really important films, right? They're films made by the youth for the community of San Diego, addressing specific topics that are really relevant to us. I'm gonna share one clip here.
Dana ng kintatangko in my daddy to'y bagyo Daawan ti panggadan ti ili anagapuan
Winter was 16 when she made that. And it's amazing, right? I'm really happy, actually, because I'll see her tonight. We're having a screening for our 15th anniversary, and I get to be with all of my students. But yeah, I wanted to show her trailer in particular because she really inspired me. And so what I want to share is, like, in this process, like, it's symbiotic. Like, I help my students, and my students help me, and that's just how I function. And I think that's why I love my grandma so much, because she taught me that. She like taught me about community. When I'm in the Philippines, when I walk down the street, everybody knows my grandma, and they're like, she's so nice, she's so nice. This photo, if you came in, when you came in, there was a button on your chair, and the photo that's on the button is this photo, and it's my grandma. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do that was when I went on the airplane, and she had mentioned, like, you know, I want to go back to the Philippines because I want to basically like die there. I want to die where I am in my country. And I asked her, like, why? Like, everybody wants you to stay. And she just replied, like, when I'm in the Philippines, everyone knows me. And when I come here, no one knows me. And why would I settle for that? And so I guess for me, the buttons are a small way, like, now you know her. You know what she's done for me. Like, I wouldn't be here, like, literally in this spot without her help. And so, yeah, I hope that when you wear it, you could share a story about who she is or being here with me today. And yeah, I think when I think of preserve, now when I see this photo, I see how it's connected to this photo, and this photo, and this photo, and it just keeps going. Like, the pictures all connect, and I'm starting to see the dots that I never saw before. And I think that's because I never really thought of myself as multiple identities. I like separated it a lot. And so, yeah, I just love, now when I look at these, I see a common thread, and that's something that I don't think I really felt a lot before.